Was the initial plan to pull the car around back, and then they had to abort mission, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and then they went out the front door? Part of the plan was to remove Nancy via the front door.
The original plan was the back. They were going to pull the car around to the rear of Nancy Guthrie's property, take her out through the back gate, and disappear into the Tucson dark without ever touching the front of the house. Then something went wrong. A dog started barking, and in an instant, the entire plan changed. The driver moved the car to the circle driveway at the front of the property. Nancy came out the front door. Blood hit the front step, and the vehicle that was now parked in that circle driveway drove across a surface that records every tire that rolls over it the way a fingerprint records a ridge. Decomposed granite, the loose desert material that covers hundreds of thousands of driveways across Tucson. Should the material that compresses under a vehicle's weight and holds the shape of every tire that passes through it until the wind moves it or another car disturbs it, or time does what time does to loose granular material in a desert environment. A former FBI Evidence Response Team agent watched the drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property and asked one question that nobody else was asking. Did anyone collect that tire impression before it was gone? Before the next vehicle pulled in? Before the investigators who did not know to look at the driveway walked across it? Before the window that decomposed granite gives you, and it is not a generous window, closed quietly without anyone realizing what was inside it? Her name is Maureen O'Connell. Yeah, she spent her career on her knees at crime scenes, coaxing evidence out of surfaces that looked like nothing to everyone else. And what she saw, and what she did not see, in that drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property, is the most important forensic observation anyone has made about this case in weeks. This is what she found, and this is what it means. Welcome to this channel. Whether you're in US, UK, Canada, Australia, or anywhere in this world tonight, I want you to leave whatever you are doing right now and drop a prayer of faith for Nancy Guthrie. Your prayers might be the key to bringing her home. Lord, we lift Nancy to you right now. Move in this investigation. Let every name on that FBI list be examined. Let every hidden thing come into the light. Let this case be quickly over and Nancy return to her home. Amen. May God keep protection you and your family tonight. Type Amen in the comment. If you believe in prayers, tell us where in the world you're praying from and drop your observation below. Before we go any further, we need to establish exactly who Maureen O'Connell is, because this is not an opinion from someone who watched some drone footage and had a thought. This is not community analysis or online speculation or a theory assembled from forum threads at midnight.
Together. I know the back doors were gated, but I think something happened that caused them to go out the front. And maybe it was that dog barking in the back. Who knows?
What O'Connell told Brian Anton on day 67 of this investigation is a professional forensic assessment delivered on the record by name to a credentialed journalist. And the weight of that assessment is inseparable from the weight of her career. The FBI's Evidence Response Team, the ERT, is not a general investigative unit. It is a specialized forensic corps. These are the agents deployed when the stakes of getting the evidence right are at their absolute highest, when a presidential event requires advanced site security assessment, when a mass casualty incident needs scene reconstruction, when a federal crime involves evidence so fragile, so scientifically contested, so critical to prosecution that standard processing is not sufficient. ERT agents go through specialized training across a wide spectrum of forensic disciplines: blood spatter analysis, digital forensics, latent print recovery, trace evidence collection, and within that world, tire impression analysis. Not as a footnote, as a core discipline. ERT agents are trained to find, photograph, preserve, cast, and analyze tire impressions in conditions ranging from the straightforward to the deeply complicated, conditions exactly like the ones present at Nancy Guthrie's property in the Catalina foothills. O'Connell served on that team. She was not a detective working a theory. She was a practitioner who processed scenes, who got on her knees with equipment and extracted evidence from surfaces that looked unremarkable to everyone standing around her. When she watches drone footage of a missing person's property, she does not see what the average viewer sees. She sees surfaces, she sees processing opportunities, she sees the forensic work that should be happening, and she evaluates whether it is. And on day 67, she sat down with Brian Anton and told him what she saw when she looked at Nancy Guthrie's driveway. And what she told him has not received nearly enough attention from anyone covering this case. Nancy Guthrie's home has what is commonly called a circle driveway, a curved, looping driveway at the front of the property that allows a vehicle to pull in, loop around, and exit without reversing. It is a practical feature, common in properties of this type across the Southwest, and most of the time it is just a driveway. But think about it for a moment from a different angle, from an operational angle. A circle driveway is designed for convenience, but it is also, from a purely tactical standpoint, designed for a quick exit. You pull in. You do what you need to do. You leave forward facing at speed the moment you decide you want to leave, with full visibility ahead. No reversing down a residential street where a neighbor might see you. No three-point turn under pressure at 2 in the morning. No awkward maneuvering with a person in the vehicle who cannot help herself and cannot be seen. You pull in, you load, you roll forward. Gone. If someone was planning to remove Nancy Guthrie from her home quickly and quietly against her will, in a way that minimized the time the vehicle spent in a compromised position, a circle driveway is exactly where you would want to stage that vehicle. O'Connell said as much. She told Brian Anton directly that the circle driveway at the front of the property is where she believes the vehicle that transported Nancy was positioned. Not a casual opinion, not a guess. A considered professional assessment from someone who has spent her career reconstructing what happened at scenes by working backward from physical evidence to the human actions that produced it. The circle driveway is where she thinks the car pulled up, but the original plan was the back. Something happened that caused a change. The driver moved to the front, and the exit happened through the circle driveway, leaving impressions in a surface that may hold more information about what happened to Nancy Guthrie than anything else recovered from that property. Now, to the back. Because O'Connell's theory is not just about where the vehicle ended up, it is about why it moved there. And the answer involves something that at first glance sounds almost too ordinary to be significant. A neighbor's dog. Dogs bark at unfamiliar people. Dogs bark at unfamiliar vehicles that do not belong on their street. They bark at unusual sounds and smells and presences that are out of the ordinary pattern of the neighborhood. And in a quiet residential area in the Catalina foothills at 2 in the morning, a dog barking persistently at a vehicle positioned near the rear of a property is exactly the kind of thing that attracts attention. It gets a curtain pulled back. It gets a porch light turned on. It gets someone stepping outside to see what the dog is reacting to. Annie O'Connell's professional read is that something, possibly the dog, possibly another unanticipated development at the rear of the property, caused the people involved to change their plan. The rear exit was compromised. The vehicle moved to the front, and the exit happened through the circle driveway instead of the back gate. We know a neighbor's dog woke up that night. We know it was staring toward Nancy's property. We know it was behaving in a way its owners described as unusual for that hour. Former SWAT Commander Bob Kroger confirmed when he walked that terrain with Brian Anton that in a quiet neighborhood like the Catalina foothills, a dog alerting at 2 in the morning tells you exactly where the presence is. Officers chasing suspects through neighborhoods like that stop and listen for dogs because dogs do not lie about direction. And the dog that night was pointing toward the back of Nancy's property, which means someone or something was at the back, and then they were not. Because they moved. And here is what connects the dog to the blood on the front step. If the original plan was to exit through the rear and that plan was aborted, If the vehicle moved from the back to the circle driveway at the front in a moment of operational pressure, then the exit through the front door happened faster and with less control than it was designed to. And a faster, less controlled removal of an 84-year-old woman who cannot walk without assistance and who cannot hear commands because her hearing aids are on the nightstand produces exactly what was found on that front step. Blood. Not planned, not staged. The result of a rushed physical contact at the front door during an exit that was never supposed to happen that way. The back was the plan. The dog may have ended it. The circle driveway was the solution, and the front step was where the cost of that change was paid in Nancy Guthrie's blood. Here is where the technical detail becomes critical. And this is the part of O'Connell's analysis that has been almost entirely absent from the broader coverage of this case. The part that this community needs to fully understand to appreciate what was potentially at stake on that circle driveway. Nancy Guthrie's driveway is not concrete. It is not asphalt or pavers or any sealed hard surface. It is decomposed granite, commonly called DG. Take a naturally occurring material formed when granite rock weathers and breaks down over time into a loose granular aggregate. It is extraordinarily common in desert landscaping across the American Southwest. In Tucson, in Phoenix, in Albuquerque, it handles the heat, it is permeable to rainfall, it requires minimal maintenance, it looks appropriate and natural in a desert environment. Hundreds of thousands of properties in Arizona use it as a primary surface material, and forensically it presents very specific and very significant problems for evidence recovery. The core issue is this. Decomposed granite is not fixed. It is a loose, shifting, granular material. It compacts under pressure, under a vehicle's tires, under foot traffic. But that compaction is not permanent. It is not like an impression left in wet soil or clay that sets and holds. The DG impression is fragile. It can be disturbed by subsequent foot traffic. It can be shifted by another vehicle driving across the same surface. It can be broken down by wind or by the temperature cycling that is a daily reality in the Sonoran Desert. In an environment where wind is a regular presence and the surface material is inherently unstable, the window for recovering a tire impression before it degrades is not generous. There is also the issue of visibility. Decomposed granite has a naturally irregular heterogeneous surface texture. It does not look like smooth mud where a tire impression stands out clearly to the naked eye. The impression exists. The compaction pattern is there under the vehicle's weight. But it can be nearly invisible under normal daylight conditions without the right equipment and the right technique. You can walk right past it. You can drive over it. You can process a crime scene around it without ever identifying it as evidence worth collecting. If you are not specifically looking for it in the right way at the right moment. Every vehicle that entered or exited Nancy Guthrie's property in the critical early days of this investigation drove across that circle driveway. Every foot of traffic that crossed it disturbed the granular surface. Every disturbance potentially degraded, altered, or destroyed a tire impression that the vehicle which transported Nancy may have left in that decomposed granite at 2 in the morning on February 1st. The question is not whether the impression was there. A vehicle staged in that driveway would have left one. The question is whether anyone identified it in time. O'Connell referenced a specific forensic photography technique when she described how tire impressions in decomposed granite need to be captured. And this technique is not well known outside the forensic community, but understanding it is essential for understanding what she was looking for in that drone footage. And what she did not see. Oblique lighting. It means positioning a light source at a very low angle relative to the surface you are photographing, almost parallel to it, raking across it, so that the light creates shadows in any depressions or raised areas in that surface. When you do this, features that are completely invisible under normal overhead or ambient light suddenly become visible. The shadows they cast under the raking light create contrast that the camera captures. You have probably experienced this principle in everyday life without thinking about it forensically. If you have ever tried to see footprints in a carpet by holding a flashlight parallel to the floor, you have used oblique lighting. The footprints that were invisible in normal room lighting become clearly visible the moment you get that light source low and let it rake across the pile. The same principle applies to tire impressions in granular surfaces. The raking light creates shadows. The shadows create contrast. The contrast reveals the impression. Without oblique lighting or an equivalent technique, tire impressions in decomposed granite are extremely difficult to photograph in a way that is forensically useful and legally defensible in court. Second, photographing the impression correctly is only the beginning. You also need scale. A calibrated ruler or measurement scale bar placed in the frame at the same plane as the impression. Those small rulers you see next to fingerprints in crime scene photographs. ERT agents carry the long versions for tire impressions. Properly scaled oblique light photography is the standard. It is what trained forensic specialists bring equipment to a scene specifically to do, and it is what Maureen O'Connell was looking for when she watched that drone footage.
The Bureau has a database filled with every tire impression you can imagine, and we can look at those photographs and they can make a cursory determination as to whether or not those tire tracks fit that tire.
O'Connell watched that drone footage the way she was trained, not looking at what was dramatic or immediately visible, looking at what investigative process was visible on that scene, specifically, whether anyone was conducting the kind of careful, systematic, technique-specific evidence collection on the circle driveway surface that the situation warranted. She did not see oblique lighting equipment in the circle driveway area, the kind of portable rigs that ERT agents bring to scenes for exactly this purpose. She did not see technicians on their knees at ground level with scales and cameras positioned for impression photography. She did not see systematic grid-based documentation of the front driveway surface centered on tire impression recovery. She did not see visible activity in the decomposed granite of the circle driveway that corresponded to the kind of forensic processing work she would expect to see on a scene with this profile. And here is where O'Connell's intellectual honesty becomes important to register. She was careful about this. She acknowledged explicitly that the FBI may have done that work at a time when the drone was not overhead, at 4 a.m. before the media arrived, during a period of scene access that is not captured in any publicly available footage. She cannot know from outside the investigation when each piece of that scene was recognized, prioritized, and processed. She was fair about the limits of what she could conclude from what she could see, but she did not see it. I and a career ERT agent looking at the available footage from a scene, looking for the forensic work that should be visible if the scene was processed as thoroughly as the situation warranted, not seeing it, not being able to confirm it happened, is not nothing. That is the observation she put on the record, and it is the foundation of the concern that follows. She was not presenting this as confirmed investigative fact. She was presenting it as her professional reading of the available evidence, the most operationally coherent explanation for what the physical evidence suggested. But she was direct enough about it that it deserves to be taken seriously. And when someone with her background points at a specific location on a property and says that is where the vehicle was staged, and that is where the forensic work should have been done, that deserves to be the center of this community's attention. Let us talk about what the FBI can actually do with a tire impression. A good one. Recovered correctly and in time, because this context is critical for understanding what was potentially at stake on that circle driveway. The FBI maintains comprehensive tire tread databases that allow forensic examiners to compare an impression recovered from a scene to a library of known tread patterns from tire manufacturers. These databases have been built over decades. They cover a substantial proportion of commercially available passenger vehicle, light truck, and commercial vehicle tires. Tire treads function in some ways analogously to fingerprints. A tread pattern identifies the tire model. The tire model narrows the vehicle class, because different vehicle classes and sizes use different tire categories. A tire impression that tells you the suspect vehicle was using a specific type of all-terrain truck. Tire tells you something meaningful about the vehicle type. A tire impression that matches a specific sedan tire category tells you something entirely different. In cases where the impression is of sufficient quality and where the tire has distinctive individual characteristics, wear patterns, road hazard damage, manufacturing irregularities, forensic examiners can sometimes narrow an identification beyond the tire model to a specific tire. This is more rare and more contested as evidence, but it happens. A tire impression analysis is a recognized forensic discipline with a substantial body of supporting case law. It has been accepted as evidence in federal court. What this means in practical terms is a chain. A clear, well-photographed, properly scaled tire impression from the circle driveway at Nancy Guthrie's home could potentially produce a tire model. The tire model narrows the vehicle class. The vehicle class combined with other investigative work, surveillance footage, witness accounts, electronic records, could produce a specific vehicle. And a specific vehicle produces leads to the people who drove it. That chain, impression to tire to vehicle to person, starts on the ground in the decomposed granite of the circle driveway. At the moment, the scene was still intact enough to hold what the vehicle left behind. This is the connection that this series has been building toward, and it is one that deserves to be stated clearly, because what looks like two contradictory theories about how Nancy left that property are actually two parts of the same coherent operational picture. The backdoor staging theory, the evidence suggesting the rear of Nancy's property was deliberately manipulated, that the doors were propped open in a specific way, that elements of the rear scene were arranged to draw investigative attention toward the back, has been one of the persistent analytical focuses of this investigation. And it has sometimes been presented as if it contradicts the evidence pointing toward the front exit. It does not. It supports it. If the back of the property was staged as deliberate misdirection, designed to make investigators spend their time analyzing the rear access point and building theories about how Nancy was carried out through the desert terrain, then the actual vehicle that transported her was positioned somewhere else entirely. The staging creates the story that investigators follow. The real exit happens where nobody is looking. In that scenario, the circle driveway at the front is not a coincidence. It is the real operational location, and the staging at the back is the reason investigators may have been looking in the wrong direction when the window for tire impression recovery was closing. Alternatively, and this is where the dog becomes essential, if the back gate was the original plan and the dog disrupted it, the circle driveway becomes the improvised solution. The rear exit was compromised. The vehicle moved to the front. The exit happened through the front door, leaving blood on the step. Either way, staged misdirection at the back or a disrupted original plan, the circle driveway at the front emerges as the operationally significant location, and the evidence from that surface is potentially central to understanding what happened. Two investigative threads that appeared to point in opposite directions, actually pointing at the same conclusion from different angles. The tire impression question does not exist in isolation. It sits alongside the other forensic threads that this investigation has been running for over 2 months. And understanding where those threads stand right now is essential for understanding the full picture. A black glove was recovered approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. It appeared visually consistent with the gloves worn by the suspect in the doorbell camera footage. It contained DNA from an unknown male. That sample went through CODIS, the federal database containing over 19 million known offender profiles, and returned no match. The suspect has not been previously arrested for a qualifying offense in any state whose records feed into that system. Investigators turned to investigative genetic genealogy, the same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer after 40 years of searching. Joseph DeAngelo evaded law enforcement for 4 decades. He was not identified because his DNA was in a database. He was identified because a distant relative uploaded their DNA to a public genealogy site. So investigators built a family tree, narrowed the suspects, and matched DeAngelo through surveillance. A case that was cold for 40 years was solved in 4 months once genetic genealogy entered the picture. Every person who has ever submitted a DNA sample to 23andMe or Ancestry DNA or GED Match or Family Tree DNA just became a potential link in the chain that leads to the identity of the person who took Nancy Guthrie. The DNA on that glove is a fingerprint, a mugshot, and a confession rolled into one. And the net of genetic genealogy, built through millions of voluntary submissions by people who never imagined they were contributing to a criminal investigation, is being drawn around it right now. And simultaneously, the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, known as CAST, is processing cell tower data from the night of the abduction. Every cell phone active in the area around Nancy's home between midnight and 4 in the morning on February 1st was logged by the nearest towers. Investigators can map which phones were present, how long they stayed, where they went afterward. If the suspect was carrying a phone, and most people are functionally incapable of leaving their phone behind, CAST has already built a movement map of every device in that area that night. A retired FBI supervisory agent confirmed to Fox News that investigators likely already have names that have surfaced and been evaluated. Some have been cleared. Others may still be in play in ways the public cannot see. The DNA is running. The genealogy is building family trees. The cell towers have been mapped. And the tire impression question, whether a critical piece of physical evidence from the circle driveway was recovered before the decomposed granite surface was disturbed beyond use, is the forensic question that a career ERT agent put on the record and that this investigation has not publicly answered. This is the part of this video that matters as much as everything that came before it. Because this channel does not present speculation as fact, and you deserve the honest version of where the evidence ends and the inference begins. We do not know whether the FBI recovered tire impressions from the circle driveway. We do not know whether they attempted to, and if so, at what point in the investigation timeline that work was conducted. We do not know whether impressions, if recovered, matched a known tire pattern in the FBI's database. We do not know whether the surface of the circle driveway was protected or disturbed before forensic processing could be completed. And we do not know what the FBI knows. We do not have access to the investigative file. We are working from what has been put on the public record. What we do know is this. Maureen O'Connell, a named former special agent with the FBI's Evidence Response Team, analyzed the available drone footage of Nancy Guthrie's property and did not see in that footage evidence that tire impression work had been conducted in the circle driveway. She identified the decomposed granite surface as a significant forensic complication for impression recovery under the conditions present at this scene. She identified the circle driveway as her leading professional assessment of where the vehicle that transported Nancy was likely staged. And she raised, carefully, explicitly on the record, the concern that if that forensic work was not done in time, a potentially critical piece of vehicle identification, evidence may be unrecoverable. That is not community speculation. That is not anonymous sourcing. That is a named qualified forensic practitioner making a specific substantiated professional observation to a named journalist about a real and ongoing missing persons case. It carries the weight that pedigree implies, and it deserves to be treated with the seriousness it carries. There are 84-year-old women all over this country who trust that their quiet residential neighborhood is safe, who live alone in properties with circle driveways and desert landscaping and neighbors whose dogs bark at unfamiliar sounds in the night, who have families who trust that the community around them provides a layer of protection that supplements whatever locks are on the doors, who have never imagined that someone spent 3 Saturday nights in January studying the rhythm of their street from the cover of a nearby work site. Whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie, and we do not yet know the full truth, and we will not pretend to, it happened near a circle driveway paved in decomposed granite. And the window for some of the most critical physical evidence from that scene may have closed before anyone was looking in the right direction, at the right location, at the right moment. That window always closes in every investigation. And the first hours and the first days determine what evidence survives and what evidence does not. That is not a failure specific to this case. It is the reality of how crime scenes work and how time operates on physical material. The question is always whether the right evidence was identified and protected in time. And what makes this case different is that we are watching it. This community has been watching it since the beginning. Through every interview, every drone pass, every on-record statement from every practitioner willing to speak, and that sustained, serious evidence-based attention, the kind that gets practitioners like Maureen O'Connell to sit down with journalists like Brian Anton on day 67 and put specific technical concerns on the record, is sometimes how cases break open. Not through drama, not through a single dramatic revelation, through sustained patient attention to the details that matter. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. Her family cannot grieve. They can only wait. And somewhere in the confirmed record of this investigation, in the tire impression that may or may not have been recovered from a decomposed granite circle driveway, in the DNA building a family tree through millions of voluntary ancestry submissions, in the cell tower data mapping every phone that was in that neighborhood between midnight and 4 in the morning, the answer to what happened on February 1st already exists. It is waiting for the science and the sustained attention to bring it forward. Share this video for Nancy. Every share keeps this case in front of someone who might know something. Every like tells the algorithm this story still matters. Subscribe so the next update reaches you the moment it breaks. Because the person responsible for what happened on February 1st is counting on the world moving on. And a community that keeps watching and keeps asking the right questions is the only pressure that does not expire. Here is what this video leaves you with. A career FBI forensic agent watched the drone footage from Nancy Guthrie's property and did not see evidence that the circle driveway, the location she identified as where the vehicle was most likely staged, had been processed for tire impressions. The decomposed granite surface that a vehicle drove across in the early hours of February 1st has a specific forensic vulnerability, and the investigation has never publicly confirmed whether that surface was worked before it was disturbed. So the question this community has to sit with is this: if the car that took Nancy left evidence in that driveway, and a career ERT agent believes it did, what happens to this case if that evidence was never collected? And what happens to it if it was? I am really curious to know your thoughts in the comment below. Drop it now.